Great. So, who you are is the sum total of all the choices you've made in your life so far. That shapes who you are today. Some of those choices have been proactive, some of them have been reactive, some of them have been big, life-changing, kind of monumental choices that have changed the course of your life, like maybe who you got married to, or where you lived, or what job you did, or maybe education, that kind of stuff. But the vast majority of the choices you've made in your life have been small. They've been seemingly insignificant, but actually they kind of altogether become incrementally very important in your life because they shape who you are as a person today. And so for the next 4 Sundays, we're going to just think about 4 key choices that maybe we would make in life. So today I'm going to be speaking about choosing purpose over popularity. I'm going to spend just a few minutes about what does it mean to live with purpose rather than living for pleasing other people. Next week, next Sunday morning, Grace will be speaking, and she'll speak about choosing surrender over control. And then the week after, it's me again with discipline over regret. And then the final one, which will actually be an outreach service, a kind of invitational service, if you like, it will be choosing the important over the urgent. Now, I have to come clean that the idea for these sermons, the titles for these sermons, are shamelessly stolen. I like to think that another church has resourced us. So they actually come from a church called Life Church in America, a guy called Craig Groeschel. His church is behind the YouVersion Bible app. A lot of us probably use that app, and they do actually produce a ton of stuff online that is available for other churches to use. And I just thought I like the titles, so we've kind of stolen the titles, and we're going to just change things, contextualize things a little bit so that it works for us. And Craig Groeschel himself is kind of very muscly and wears very tight t-shirts. So just like me, we won't be going down that line. Now, if I was to ask you to imagine a world where everyone likes you, everyone approves of you, everyone thinks that you're great, everyone thinks that all your ideas are the best, we would be wasting our time even imagining that world, because that world doesn't exist, it can't exist, it will never exist. That world where everyone likes you, that world is like the Truman Show. It's not real, okay? It's a fake world, so there's no point even trying to imagine it, if you like. But if I was to ask you to imagine a world where you're less worried about what other people think, less worried whether you're impressing them and whether they like you, because you're more concerned with pleasing God, then I think that's possible, and I think that's something we should be aiming for and thinking about and dwelling upon a little bit. So I want to talk today about choosing purpose over popularity. And the key thing I think we need to know today, and we're going to just bounce through a few different scriptures rather than stay in one this morning, is that living for the approval of other people will, generally speaking, keep us from living for the purposes of God. Not always, but generally, when we try and live for the approval of other people, it will keep us from living for the purposes of God. Usually, being a people pleaser does not line up with being a God pleaser. Not always, all right, before you come back with 100 examples of how it can work, all right, but just generally speaking. So we're going to look today, just in the few minutes we've got, at 3 ways in which living with purpose, and I'm going to speak about that just in a moment, living with purpose has power to encourage us to make good choices that are pleasing to God, even if they're not pleasing to other people. Now, I realize when I speak about purpose and living with purpose, some of us get a bit stressed by that, a little bit worried, because we think we don't know what our purpose is. It's one of the probably most common conversations I have as a pastor with people, is that they don't know what their purpose is in life. And I think that's because we tend to think of purpose only as being a huge, great, big thing, like purpose with a capital P. We tend to think of it in those terms, like, the kind of, what is the overall specific reason that I exist? What is it that God is calling me to do? Why am I here? What should I be doing with my life? Now, in keeping with Western culture, because we live in Western culture, that is very Western thinking, because it places who at the center? Us. It places you and me at the center of everything. So purpose is all about me, isn't it? What am I supposed to be doing, and do I feel fulfilled? And am I using my immense gifts that God has given to me that I need to give to the world, or else the world is missing out on me? Well, what I want to do is just pull back slightly from that big purpose. There are big purposes in our lives, but I want to pull back a little bit from that and say that primarily I want to talk about the purposes of our lives with a sort of small p, if you like, not quite as big. And what I mean by that is the day-to-day ways in which we follow God and serve God and make decisions that honor him. And they may not look like very much each decision, but over time they build up into something that is much more, which is a lifetime of following Jesus, a lifetime of obedience. And they may even help shape us in our kind of big P purpose. Something I often quote to you is the Westminster Shorter Catechism from 1646. I do often quote to you the first question, which this was a series of questions and answers written back then. There they all are, the gang, just writing it in Parliament. And question number 1, what is the chief end? What is the purpose of man? They wrote man. We might write man and woman or people. And the answer is man's chief end, purpose, is to glorify God and enjoy him fully forever. That's the purpose we're talking about. Living with purpose is to enjoy God, to glorify God, and enjoy him fully forever. It's what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians 7:17 when he says each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. So Paul is saying, actually your purpose as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, is to live as a believer in every situation where you find yourself. So that means showing mercy and grace and compassion and kindness and forgiveness and love, especially towards those who don't deserve it, because that is to live in a Christ-like way. It means choosing to live and to act justly and fairly, with honor, with integrity. It means choosing to defend people who have no voice of their own. It means choosing to do the right things when the wrong things look more attractive or easier or more lucrative. It means choosing to live a holy life, a morally good life, when sin seems like a much more fun option. It means choosing in hundreds and hundreds of small choices to honor God, to put him first, and to live the way that he wants us to live. We're going to illustrate those choices as we go on, but that's really what it means to live with purpose. Paul says in Philippians 2:12, "Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling. For it's God who works in you to will and to act in order to fulfill his good purpose." Okay? His is the purpose. We live with that purpose. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. Just feel that might be a word for someone this morning. You might just want to turn to the person next to you and say, I think that's probably for you, that word. Do everything without grumbling or arguing. Might have a few more sign-ups for the marriage course now. So that you may become blameless and pure, children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation. Then you will shine among them like stars in the sky as you hold firmly to the word of life. And then I will be able to boast on the day of Christ that I did not labor or run in vain. God's purpose for our lives, for your life, for my life, as followers of Jesus, is to shine like stars in a warped and crooked generation. That's what he wants us to do. And we do that through hundreds of tiny choices. So maybe there may be some big purpose stuff about what God wants you to do with your life, all that kind of stuff. But I can tell you for sure, he wants you to live in a way that shines like a star in this crooked and warped generation, that actually lives a godly and God-honoring life. So that might be at home, it might be at work, it might be in church, it might be on the mission field, abroad, it might be wherever. I actually think God is more concerned about us doing that than even the specifics of where we do it. He wants us to live, as it were, as Christians, as believers in every situation. So with that in mind, That's the purpose we're living for. What are the three things that living with purpose will achieve for us and will just help us? And hopefully this will be helpful to you this morning. Here we go. Number one, purpose diminishes distractions. Purpose diminishes distractions. So we all face a myriad of distractions in our lives, don't we, every day. Things that would distract us from following God. Things that would just knock us off course from doing what we've just talked about in many ways, and cause us to make bad choices. So here's a few of them. Distractions. We have the distraction of comparison. Comparison. We always look at someone else and they're doing better than us. So we compare our ordinary mundane life with their Instagram life. And their Instagram life looks amazing, doesn't it? Do you know what? It's not true. It's all filters. It's all smoke and mirrors. Us pastors, we're the worst at it. Like just posting pictures. If you get the right camera angle, you can make your church look ginormous. Looks amazing. Terrible. And we're all awful at it. You should go to a pastor's conference. It's the most insecure place you can ever go to in your life. But anyway, there's the distraction of criticism. Someone complains to you or about you, and it just knocks you off course a little bit as you've kind of got this criticism coming. No one likes being criticized in any way, or even having criticism about someone else, but you're there. And it distracts you from following Jesus in so many ways. There's a distraction of entertainment. Life's hard work, we just want a bit of fun. And before we know where we are, entertainment is distracting us from living with this purpose of God. And there's a distraction of sin as well. There are so many ways we can be distracted from following Jesus. But choosing to live with purpose, making the choice, a deliberate decision that I am going to live with purpose, diminishes those distractions. Let's have a little look at Nehemiah. Here he is. If you were here last week, you know we spoke about Jeremiah. And Jeremiah last week, as we were talking, was writing in 586 BC. Anybody remember what happened in 586 BC from last week? Yeah, so the Babylonians invaded Jerusalem, took over, ransacked the city, destroyed it, took all the people back to Babylon as captives. Jeremiah stayed in Jerusalem and wept and lamented. That's what we talked about last week. But the rest of the people of Israel, people of Judah, went back to Babylon and stayed there for around 70 years. Now, after the 70 years, Cyrus the Great from Persia invaded Babylon. So Persia, modern-day Iran, invaded Babylon, modern-day Iraq. So if you thought the Iran-Iraq war started in the 1980s, it didn't. It was 2,500 years ago, they were still doing it. So Iran effectively invaded Iraq. Now Cyrus the Great comes into Babylon, and he's got all these Jewish people who are held as captives. He doesn't want them there, so he sends them home. It's not that he was nice, it was more of a sort of pragmatic thing, really. He just wanted to get rid of them. So he sends them back to Jerusalem. Now, little side note for you, another little pub quiz answer for you if you ever need it, is that the people of Israel only become known as Jews after the return from exile. So all the rest of the Old Testament, they are Hebrews or Israelites. After the Babylonian exile and then the return, they are known as Jews because they are only the people of Judah at this point. All the other tribes have disappeared, have gone. So they're called Jews. So the Jews didn't wander in the wilderness and go through the Red Sea, okay? That was the Hebrews or the Israelites. It's a minor point, but I'm just giving it to you for free. Anyway, Nehemiah is one of these Jews who returns to Jerusalem with all the rest of the Jews to rebuild the city and rebuild the walls. In fact, he's one of the leaders who's rebuilding the city. Have a little look at what happens. Nehemiah 6, verse 1. When word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies, so these are the people against the Jews, that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I'd not set the doors in the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message, come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono. It's a great name for a place, isn't it? Do you want to go to Ono? But they were scheming to harm me. So I sent messages to them with this reply, I'm carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? Nehemiah's enemies tried to distract him from building the wall, from building the city that he's been called to do, from doing the purposes to God. They try and distract him and say, come away from where you are, come down onto the plains of Ono and we'll do something different. And the answer that Nehemiah gives is fantastic. He says, no, I'm carrying on a great project. I'm doing a great work. Why should I stop and go with you? Why should I be distracted from what God has called me to do because I'm doing a great work, a great project? Now, you might be thinking, well, it was probably easier for him because he knew that God had called him to do this and all of that kind of stuff. It wasn't. It was no easier for Nehemiah than it is for us. Nehemiah's work was to put one brick on top of another brick on top of another brick, oversee other people putting bricks on top of bricks. He was building a wall. That was what his job was. That was what his day-to-day job, or purpose, if you like, was to build this city. I wonder if you've ever heard the story of the 3 bricklayers. 1666, the Great Fire of London destroyed St. Paul's Cathedral. And Sir Christopher Wren commissioned to build a new one. That's the one that we have still today. And he goes along, apparently, and he meets 3 different bricklayers. And he walks up to the first one. And he says to the first bricklayer, what are you doing? And the guy says, I'm just putting one brick on top of another brick. Then he goes to the next bricklayer and says, what are you doing? And the guy says, well, I'm building this wall because that pays my salary so I can look after my family. Then he goes to the third bricklayer and he says, what are you doing? And he says, I'm building a beautiful cathedral as an act of worship to God so that generations to come can give glory to him. All 3 of them were doing the same thing, but that last guy was living with purpose. That's what diminishes the distractions in our lives. You see, I'm just reflecting on these words of Nehemiah. I'm doing a great work, so I'm not going to come down from it. You know what? I think for many of us at the moment, maybe money is tight. And so let's just take an example. You go to work every day with a packed lunch, but the rest of the office is going out for lunch every day. But you know you've got a bit of debt. You know you can't make ends meet. And so when they say, come on, come out for lunch. Come on, because it's only a tenner. It's only a tenner every day, because come and have lunch. You can say, whether in your head or heart or out loud, no, I'm doing a great work. I'm living with purpose. I'm honoring God with my money. And so I'm not going to come down from where I am. When this world kind of tries to tempt us to live in an impure way, then actually we can come and just say, no, I'm not going to. I'm doing a great work. I'm living with purpose. I'm following Jesus. So I'm not going to come down from there. You know, there are just everyday small choices that we make whereby we can say, no, I am doing a great work because I'm living with purpose. It looks like I'm just putting one brick on top of another brick, but I'm doing it in a way that is honoring God. And so we do that every day in our lives, and we live with purpose. And that diminishes the distractions around us. We need to be people who live with that purpose of honoring God daily in our lives. Let's have a look at something else. Purpose pushes you through pain. Living with this kind of sense of purpose, of honoring God, pushes us through the inevitable pain that kind of comes our way as a result of following Jesus. Now, if you went to the New Testament, to Hebrews chapter 11, you will see it's like a hall of fame of people of faith, where just person after person, the writer to the Hebrews kind of mentions these different people. And you see that almost all of them, I think probably all of them actually, have to go through pain and suffering in their lives in order to follow Jesus, in order to do what God had called them to do. Have a look at this one, Moses. Hebrews 11:24. By faith, Moses, when he'd grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be ill-treated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the fleeting pleasures of sin. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. I love this about Moses. If you know the story of his life, or if you've ever watched this film, you'll know something about Moses. He grows up in Pharaoh's household. He's treated as one of them. And yet, we've just read there, he chooses to leave that incredibly privileged situation because he knew that he needed to be with God's people. He knew what God was calling him to do. And he ends up suffering a lot. He goes through an awful lot of suffering in his life. But because he was living with that purpose of honoring God with his life, he endures that pain. Have a look at these verses. Hebrews 11:36. It says it talks about just a whole load of people. It says some faced jeers and flogging, and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawn in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and ill-treated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. Living with purpose, living with this sense of purpose, of pleasing God, of honoring him, will almost always take us through seasons of sadness, of suffering, of pain, of difficulty. You see it in the lives of every biblical character. You see it in the life of Jesus himself, who endures pain because he lives with purpose. Because doing what God has called you to do does not always please everyone else. Not everyone else will like it. Other people will not understand it and will come against us. And yet living with this sense of purpose pushes us through. We've got 3 daughters, Joe and I. Most of you all know. And I was in the room for the birth of all 3 of them. That's not one of them. That's just a stock photo. But I was there for all 3 of them. They say that giving birth is one of the most painful and traumatic experiences in life. Apparently, it's almost as bad as man flu. I don't know whether I believe it myself. I think it's unlikely. But if it's so painful and so traumatic, why do so many women go through it? And so many women go through it multiple times in their lives? Well, it's because, thank you, the reason is because there's purpose to the pain. There's a point to it. There's purpose to it. There's this kind of moment of joy, isn't there? That after the birth, the baby is handed by the midwife to the mother. And it's this incredible moment of like, this baby is there. And it's the most amazing moment in your life. And it's not that the pain disappears or is forgotten or anything. It's just that it was worth it for what has come, for this gift that has come, this purpose that has happened. You see, I wonder maybe today you're going through some pain in your life as you're following Jesus. Maybe because you are following Jesus. Maybe some pain that's causing you to be on your own, or some pain that is causing you to live in a different way than what you would sort of naturally want to because you're following Jesus. Maybe you're facing some level of kind of persecution. Someone in our church is going through that at the moment, actually, in a really hard way. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to share it, but just going through some stuff that's really difficult to get through, kind of persecution kind of stuff. Well, I want to say today that the pain you and I may feel as we go through stuff is very real. I'm not diminishing the pain in any way. But I want to say that living with the purpose of honoring God is what pushes us through the pain. We recognize that it is worth it. There is a goal. There is a prize. One day we will be free of all this. One day we will be with him forever in glory. One day we will be beyond it. And it's living with that sense of purpose, of honoring God, that pushes us through it. Last thing I just want to say to us today, number 3, purpose empowers you to please God. Choosing to live with this sense of purpose, of this following Jesus, of honoring him with our lives, will help us to live a life that pleases God rather than pleases the people around us. Acts chapter 5, verse 29, Peter and the others have been hauled before the Sanhedrin, the kind of Jewish ruling council. It's a big circular room. They're standing in the middle. All the Jewish elders are around them. And they say to them, right, stop preaching about Jesus. Stop it. Okay? So if you're a people pleaser, what do? You say, all right, no problem, we'll stop. What does Peter say? Peter and the other apostles replied, we must obey God rather than human beings. We must please God. The easy choice in that situation is to keep quiet, to choose popularity over purpose, to please the people around them. Of course, the truth is, you can't please all the people around you. So even when you try to do it, you end up failing miserably. If you try to be the most accommodating, liberally minded, compassionate person in the world, you will end up not pleasing all the people around you. But, and this is a big one, we can live to please God. We can do that. We can live a life that pleases him. You see, Hebrews 11 verse 6 says, without faith it's impossible to please God. So that means with faith, it is possible to please God. When we live with this sense of purpose, and it diminishes the distractions so that we stay focused, and it removes the pain from around us, we can actually live in a way that pleases him. It is possible to please God. I mean, we can try and live in a way that pleases all the random people around us. We can try and just make everyone like us and love us. We can put nice things on social media all the time, but actually we'll never please everyone. But there is one person we can please, and he is the most important person, which is God. We can live a life that pleases him. So I want to call us today to a renewed choice, a renewed choosing of purpose over popularity. A renewed choosing of living to please God. Of making the difficult decisions sometimes, but many of which will just be very small decisions day by day of actually, I'm going to honor God. I'm going to honor God. I'm going to put him first. I'm going to seek to please him. I'm going to trust him. I'm going to go after him. I'm going to turn up at that thing. I'm not going to go to that thing. I'm going to spend my money here and not there. I'm going to save my money there because I need to. I'm going to keep myself pure. I'm not going to have that extra drink. I'm not going to do all the little tiny decisions that we do to honor God. And as we do that, the distractions come our way, and the comparisons and the criticisms and the entertainment and the sin and all that kind of stuff comes our way, and we can say, no. I'm doing a great work here because I'm living with purpose to follow God. So I am not going to come down from this purpose and give it up just to please you. I'm going to follow God. And when the pain comes, living with that sense of purpose means we can push through it. It doesn't go away, it doesn't diminish it, but we will get through it and come out the other side because we are living to please God. And this sense of purpose will empower us to do that. So let me call us to do that as individuals and as a church, to live as people who please God. And maybe even today, you'll need to make some decisions, some changes, some alterations to your life. Maybe you'll need to set some different parameters, boundaries as you look ahead to the weeks, months, years ahead and just think, actually, I'm going to make this little change, this choice now. Because you know what? A 1 degree change hardly makes any difference initially. Feels tiny. But if you keep walking on a 1 degree change over a period of time, you'll end up way apart from where you would have been if you'd stayed on the original track. Maybe some of us need to make some 1 degree changes, 1 degree decisions, and live with purpose, not popularity. We're going to sing a song as we finish.